So let me try this again. We are recording this to the cloud. This is part 2 of your favorite class ever, R622 Learning Environment Design, coming here from lovely Bloomington, Indiana. And so we need to talk about things that are important in this class, like what is learning environment design all about? It entails creating realistic, authentic, meaningful, relevant learning environments. Oh, I don't want to give too much away. So what I want to do is a little warm-up activity to start with anyhow to the second part of class here is to have you put in the chat window principles of what an authentic learning environment would look like. What comes to mind when I say authentic learning environment? And you can put maybe a 1 by each of your principles. Put a 2 by any examples that you have of an authentic learning environment. Put a 3 by any questions that you have about authentic learning environments for me. So 1, 2, 3. 1 are principles that one has. 2 are an examples. 3 is questions, principles, examples, and questions. A 1, 2, or a 3. I'll give you a couple of seconds to put those in there, and maybe I should blab a bit about what I think are important. So again, principles is a 1, examples is a 2, and questions is a 3. So Randy, yes, practice-based learning. So that would be a 1. Put a 1 in front of that. Type that in again, Randy, and put a 1 in. Randy, put a 1 in front of it. There we go. Thank you. And we'll see if the principles that you all come up with are similar to the principles that I came up with, that experts have come up with. Thank you, Maria. Learners being learner-centered. Tangible. That's a word we don't get too often, is it? Tangible. I hear relevance a lot. I hear real world a lot. Contextually based a lot. We'll talk about tangible. That's an intriguing word. Assessment choices. Thank you, Maria. Again, more. Communication, cooperation. Get the C words that Rebecca was talking about. PBL is an example that we'll come back to, y'all. What's the difference between general PBL and authentic learning? Is there such a thing as general PBL? I guess general, generic PBL across all platforms and authentic learning. Are all PBL examples a case of authentic learning? Can you do problem-based learning and it not be authentic? Could it be jerry-rigged? And I think that we could create some activities for students to engage in where they're solving a problem. It's not an authentic problem, it's a fictional problem. It's a futuristic problem. That's maybe a far out there kind of problem. That could be PBL, but it's not authentic because we're not going to experience it anytime soon. So you could be talking about learners in the year 2150, okay? Or 2300. Or we talk about learning back in Aristotle's time. It's not authentic today, but it would have been back when Socrates and Aristotle and Plato were living, right? So it'd be maybe we could create some kind of PBL assignment for related to learners getting access to technology from Viking ships in the year 970 AD, you know. That would be PBL. We could create a PBL, and maybe there's a lack of resource issue or something like that, but it's not going to be authentic because we're not living in that time. So I think I've answered this question. Personalized feedback. Thank you, Maria. You got lots of ideas tonight, Maria. Thank you. What else do we have up here? Corinne, sensitive to diverse cultural and social backgrounds. So, well, today's dissertation defense was exactly on that topic, along with UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and a lot of things that Rebecca was talking about today. Her implications this morning was about 6 pages of things I should share with all of you because they're spot on ideas to help engage learners in online environments. I'll see if I can get that create a little handout from today's dissertation. Galton, AL or AI, Golson? Authentic learning, AL, okay, is related to real world experiences and therefore problem-based learning. Thank you. Maria, again, how to implement authentic learning in large and diverse classrooms. Okay, maybe we need to tackle Maria's question first. How can instructors, or how can instructional designers, or how can a program manager, or how can an entire department create sustainable, usable, authentic learning when the students are in a large and diverse classroom? That's when we start creating problems that are beyond the normal size and have students subdivide up the different types of answers that they might contrive, such as when I was an early faculty member here at Indiana, someone designed a PBL activities where students were forming teams to solve a PCB problem that we had in the water in Bloomington from Westinghouse Company and other companies on the west side of Bloomington. It was a serious water issue. And the students were set up to utilize the knowledge they were learning in a learning theory / educational psychology course, where the instructor told them that they're going to have to come up with some kind of materials, training materials, to handle the training needs that Bloomington would have to make people aware of the issue, the water pollution issues that we had, but not only that, to go much further beyond it. And the students could then form teams. Maybe one team would be focused on one educational sector, such as K-12, and another one on higher ed environments, and another one on local community, and another one maybe on governmental. And they would create materials that would relate to the different audiences. So while the problem was one problem, the audiences were multifaceted, the stakeholders were multifaceted, and each group was addressing one portion of that. So even though it was a class, it could be a class of 100 people or more, each group could maybe be 5 to 10 people working on specific aspects of it and then building up into maybe something larger. They maybe combine the individual groups, so maybe work together at the end to have all the groups synthesize across them. And so then each group would be addressing a particular population and have an important stakeholder that they're working towards, and wouldn't be stepping on the toes of the other groups per se. Or you could have two groups work on with each particular stakeholder group, and you could utilize the best ideas from one of the two groups, and they could have a little competition with cooperation embedded in that. So you'd be combining elements. And if you start thinking about the different stakeholders that one might have, be it parents, students, be it local industry, politicians, government, I should say, and K-12 audiences, you could pretty easily ramp this up to a large audience. This is just one example, but I could go back to having mini competitions, so you could have maybe with a large class, and how large is large? Let's say, let's just say a class of 50, you could have 10 groups of 5 students, each working to solve the same problem, and have a jury of stakeholders select which group had the best answer to solve the problem. I have seen that work in our Kelly Business School. The Kelly Business School is blessed to have some money behind it. So the students in the end, one of the projects I remember were students who were designing a mobile version of our learning management system called Oncourse. And they had teams that were formed that were creating the technologies, and again, a marketing team and a budget team and all these things. And they were all working together to address the issue of making the learning management system more mobile in nature. And this was like 15 years ago. Okay, so it's a while ago. Might even be 20 years ago. So it's back when mobile was hot, around 2007, 2008. And Toshiba and maybe Sony offered students monetary or technology-based rewards for the best solution. So there were huge devotion of effort, and the student teams were formed across the business school, the informatics school, and maybe information science. There were three, for sure, the informatics and business school, but I think there was a third, computer science, maybe. Back then, computer science wasn't married, wasn't merged with informatics, so they were separate. Back then, so they had three different classes of students that were all working together. The business students had to work with computer science students and had to work with human computer interaction students from informatics to do the designs. And the business students were handling the marketing, for instance, or the management, or the strategic plans, for instance. The computer science students, of course, were handling the code and that kind of thing. The HCI, human computer interactions, were running subjects through the technology, doing usability testing. So that's another way to have a large population across three classes to work together to solve that problem. Now, Maria, I'm just answering this off the top of my head, and I've come up with two or three examples. This is, again, there's much more that if one was given a week, you could design the whole curriculum behind this. But does that kind of get at something that you would consider? Okay. In the K-12 space, when I was a graduate student, we had a class of 200 students, and we had teams of 10 each at elementary level and secondary education level. And on each team of 10, they would have a parent, a special ed director, two students maybe on it, an educational psychologist, and maybe five other roles. So all five, and they had to work together to create an IEP, individualized education plan for a special education student as their final project. It was to solve the issue of the student not being successful. So it's kind of problem-based learning, more case-based / problem-based learning in that case. And the students color coded their work. We didn't know whose work was each one. The student names were on it, but it was color coded. That was kind of interesting too. Um, but yeah, we had 100 secondary majors and 100 elementary majors in the same class. It was a huge class on mainstreaming. So that's a third example, if you will, where we handled large section college classes and with real PBL kinds of things. Now, gets me thinking about case-based learning leading to problem-based learning, where a lot of undergraduate sociology classes and psychology classes and business classes, you might embed a set of cases that students are solving, maybe ethics cases with AI, for instance. And then maybe half the semester you spend solving cases. The second half of the semester, you give them the PBL activity over the last few weeks, the last month, and expand what they're doing. They're doing more localized case-based solutions, more conscribed, more limited, and then open it up for a broader one once they're comfortable with the discipline and solving the particular cases or scenarios in a small one-off, two-off case-based setting. So that's four different ideas I think I've come up with so far. Do we have any other questions? I know we have a lot of principles here. I haven't opened up this thing. We got three more. Let me see here if we have. So David's got simulation role play. Good. Okay. Authentic role play. David, do you have a question in here? I think somewhere you want to ask it?
Sure. I was wondering, how can we incorporate more authentic like role play activities in asynchronous courses? And like for an example, I have a faculty member we're working with who it's a academic advising course, and she's having learners split up into groups.
Yeah.
One group act as the student, one group act as the advisor, and each gets separate information the other doesn't have before they enter that role play. So as kind of an example of kind of what I'm looking for.
Yeah, where each gets a piece of the information, and that way they have to rely on their other group members, right? So that's the key to that working, right? So go ahead and restate the question one more time.
Oh, sorry. Are there other ways that you can think of and how we can kind of incorporate some of those more authentic like role play activities in asynchronous online courses?
Yeah, there's a little spin the wheel, give the role, based on where that comes up. So it's random. So you don't know who's going to get the particular roles, right? I also hand out slips of paper if it's a blended class to before the students when they leave. they all can have a role, and then when they go home, they are participating from the role that they got on their way out the door. That works pretty well, actually. And I also have a sign up. I have a sign up with 28 different roles to play. And so students at the beginning of the semester sign up for a couple of weeks. I don't do all 15 weeks of role play, usually 2 or 3. And they take on different roles like a optimist, a pessimist, a devil's advocate, a slacker, a judge, a warrior, all this. And they're, taking on these personality roles for a week or 2 weeks, and then they reflect on the roles that they took on. So it could be signed up, it could be randomly assigned through note cards, it could be a combination of those couple of different ways, and it could be student selected roles. They could design their own roles and then with approval from the instructor, and then get slotted into this group or that group afterwards, or it could go back and forth, starting with pre-assigned and then having student choice, back and forth like that too. So role play, debate, you could do a structure of controversy where 2 people on have one side and 2 people on the other side, and they have to accumulate resources to defend their points of view, and then they might be replaced by a different team if they don't do well. It rotates. Now, Corinne had her hands up, so she has probably got some
Yeah, I
suggestions.
want to share one example to answer your question, David, if it's useful. I wrote a paper, put in the Google Drive, my Google Drive there. It's Dr. Helen Pullins, and basically she's one of the top professors. She received an awards a year after, about at the University of Toledo, which is the #1 sales training for salespeople if you want to hire them. I mean, they are very good. They're very, very well trained from employers. She's one of them.
Okay, American expression right now. Holy Toledo.
And then, so basically, she did these kind of asynchronous courses, especially after COVID, during COVID and all of those. And then basically, the point was to have different groups doing the role play, and then have a peer learning, tools where she can assess each other's. And then in that systems, she was able to provide more small assignment in a more asynchronous way, which was more motivating for the students. What she found out, because she also published another paper in addition of what I have shared in a Google right now with you. And then she has a philosophy, and you can read in a reference page that I gave it to you in that document. She wrote the document, Mante and all. Oh, yeah, I put in a parenthesis. This document, if you read it, she includes feedback from the employers. So sales training, sales, because she wants to make, so basically, I don't know what your field is about, but if you're in sales, for example, then you bring employers and then they get feedback. So they get motivated to do a better job, and that motivates them to do real role play, and then the role play is also assessed by the workforce.
You can also have role play by the readings that one has, and you have students assume different roles within those readings. Or I do scholarly role play. I mentioned Bereiter and Scardamelia earlier at the University of Toronto, who I based my dissertation on. I sometimes assign students those scholarly people, the well-known people, and they have to research them in order to role play what their perspective would be on a particular topic, maybe debating learning theory, for instance, or particular point of view, or research directions, or whatever topic is. So scholarly role play, random role play, little slips of paper I give them as roles. I tell them not to share what they are. Or they might take on that role for a brief bit and then exchange with someone else and change the role, so that they can have an attempt at a couple different roles. So I wouldn't have them take the same role for more than 2 or 3 weeks, in any class. That's long enough to get that experience. Maybe two's a good number, I find, but maybe 3 sometimes. Any other questions for me before I go to a couple slides on authentic learning? or comments? Okay,
But maybe I
anything?
have one question for you, Dr. Mark. I put you on the spot, but I
I
did
always have an answer because I can hold up a Y or an N, yes or no.
yeah. Well, I wrote an assignment with you last year, so you know about it, about authentic assessment. But I haven't finished that document because it was too long already. But I will still finish at some point about the AI portion in authentic assessment. So I started doing that, and I wanted to ask you if you have found any frameworks or core characteristics in some papers, and maybe you will share in your slide, that could guide me writing more about like how AI is viewed in the authentic assessment.
No, but I'm going to answer a different question that you raised here. Authentic assessment oftentimes leads to multiple pathways and students and multiple opportunities, which stymie students. And it leads to a significant time investment. And so you have to be, as an instructor, willing to provide that extra scaffold of support or nudge and motivation from time to time, or the students may not finish. You also have to provide some guidance for them as to when the scope is too large, or potentially too large for them to complete that. In terms of having a scheme to assess the AI component or the human component or both, I don't have a specific one, but that'd probably be pretty easy to find today because these are being generated right and left. But the area of authentic assessment is scary for many people for many reasons. Number one, maybe their colleagues aren't using it and they're all alone by themselves and they're trying something new. And then it goes haywire where students opt out for the alternative, the old version. I've seen that happen. Oh, back when I was at West Virginia, they went to authentic assessment, problem-based learning, and all this. Really, this is a true story. For the city of Morgantown, where I was, and the students in the ed psych classes were doing it, and the students complained. They didn't want to do it. It was too much work. So the teacher said, okay, we'll go back to the way this was being taught. Within 2 weeks, the students are all complaining that the traditional way is too boring. They want to go back to the authentic assessment, okay? So the familiarity of the students might bias them in terms of the effectiveness of authentic assessment. So there might need to be a training component, might need to have testimonials from students that it works. Hang on, it's going to be difficult at the beginning. You might feel lost. It's different than a traditional. But wait to the third week before you rebel and revolt against the instructor. Okay. So, I've seen that not just there. That was not my class. That was different people's classes that we interviewed the instructors at the time. But then I saw it happen in Bloomington with my classes. The same thing. I had some innovative ideas I was trying out, and really the students weren't taking me up on it. They didn't really feel that enthused by them. But then they saw the alternative, the drudgery of the test and exam cycle. And they said, can we go back to what you had originally thought about? Okay, yeah, let's try that. So, and maybe if it is successful, you recruit last semester's students or last year's students to come back to talk about what was successful and what maybe worked and what didn't work, so as to build a bridge between the history of the entire class. You're creating community across the class. So if it works, you don't just clap at the end of the semester and giving everyone A's or A pluses and send them on their way. No, you recruit them. They become part of the class and part of who you are. And that, to me, is the exciting part of teaching and the exciting part of what can separate a traditional class that's effective, that's good, from a fabulous experience that's life-changing, potentially life-changing event. And it's part of the community, it's respect, it's initiative, it's participation. it's authentic learning. It might be PBL. So going back to Yoel's question, does PBL have to be authentic? You know, I think authentic is a bigger word than PBL. Okay, and if you have something authentic, it may or may not be PBL. It may have a component of PBL, maybe like PBL. It might align exactly like PBL, but again, authentic, meaningful, relevant learning can have PBL. It could have project-based learning as opposed to problem-based learning. It could have some other, global collaboration, some other technique. So PBL is a method as well as a philosophy. It's not necessarily a psychological principle. Okay. PBL is a technique the instructor has chosen that may work within a classroom setting, but it's something we do as an instructor. It is powerful, it is empowering, but it is not empowerment. PBL is not empowerment. Don't equate the two together, I guess, is what I'm saying. Well, let me go to my slides.
Thank you.
Yeah. So authentic learning, and I just grabbed this off the web tonight. This is not my definition. I could come up with mine. Authentic learning is an educational approach where students engage in real-world meaningful tasks. These are the words: authentic, meaningful, real-world, and problems. So problem-based learning and problems to foster understanding. So again, we want deep learning as opposed to surface skimming. We don't just want to be squirrels eating as much as we can so we can hibernate for the winter, but foster deeper understanding and skill transfer so we can utilize the skills across different life contexts and situations. Real world emphasizes real world meaningful content and student collaboration, meaning making, negotiation, participation, collaboration to develop practical competency-based types of skills. Now, this Friday, we're going to have people from Mauritius and island off Africa talking about micro-credentials. This is the big movement in Africa today, is micro-credentials, practical skills, competencies that students need to move up in their careers. Interacting with experts, experiencing diverse perspectives, and creating tangible projects. So project-based learning, social cognition, diverse perspectives, working with, getting scaffolded advice from students, from experts, from scaffolded job aids, all sorts of things. It's a pretty comprehensive definition, actually. Could it include more examples? Sure, but this is a pretty good start, if you will. So key characteristics, divide this up. Real world tasks, learning activities mirror the real world challenges, projects, and problem-solving scenarios. So acting like a chemist or a physicist or like a doctor or paramedic or occupational therapist. You might have a case or a set of scenarios that you're solving and projects that you're working within as a physical therapist or social worker, or whatever the job might be. Personal and cultural relevance. The content connects to learners' lives and the practices of academic or professional life. So, here we're again going into possible roles that one might have in the real world, their real life experiences, if you will. So the more fidelity you can get, the better in terms of simulations, virtual reality, augmented reality, and so forth. So having just a paragraph written in text and a couple pictures and slides, it's not real high fidelity. It's not really embedded in the real world. So you might not learn as much as you would when you're embedded as an intern doing a practicum or some kind of internship type of experience. Number 3, authentic audience. Students often present their work to the real world, giving their efforts purpose and meaning. So when my students present their final projects to other students in the program, to future students in the program, to prior students in the program, to possible people in the business field or people who might employ them later on, this is powerful. And this is the kind of thing you'll see in short video clips from the George Lucas Education Foundation. You'll see students presenting their ideas to people in the government or corporate world or academic world, their final solutions to a problem. Maybe it's climate change issue or something else. And then so they know they're going to have experts in the audience, or they're going to have those that know more than them with prior students in the audience, for instance. Expert performers, students can learn from observing or interacting with experts. This gets back at social learning theory from Albert Bandura, that we watch others drive before we in fact drive a car so we don't get in accidents, right? We learn from watching, a famous baseball player, Aaron Judge, play for the New York Yankees and hitting home runs before so we watch role models out there perform, whether it is in the work world or in the sports world or in the personal lives or whatever. So expert performers that we look at as role models for us. Collaborative knowledge construction, Rebecca was getting at, that's her dissertation. Since her dissertation, that's what she works on. And that's what many people in the field today are concerned with, is having students negotiate meeting, discuss. So having them share their ideas and their understandings, their strategies, so that we can learn from each other and appropriate the different learning strategies of our peers. So collaborative knowledge construction, learners work together to build understanding and then reflect, like my R2D2 model. Read, reflect, display, and do. We reflect on what we've learned, so we ingrain that learning. We get multiple tracks to our learning and can retrieve it in many different ways. Reflecting on a common practice in many professions, and then reflection, students reflect on their experiences again. So we got reflect. As I said, so the most important component of the R2D2 model is reflect. We don't just learn from reading, we have to reflect on it and maybe present it to others to build self-awareness, to improve our learning, to improve our meta understanding of where we're at. And then examples include students address a real world problem like water conservation in their school, propose different solutions to the school board or to the PTA, Parent Teacher Association, or to a local community, again, or to older students. Simulations in virtual environments, students can perform different chemistry experiments, biology experiments, and so forth in semi-realistic role play types of scenarios, explaining what they learned, what they didn't learn, what they'd still like to learn along the way. Do a KWL, what do I know? What did I learn? What didn't I learn? And, how will I learn it? Creating and consuming content using social media and online platforms to share. So in Instagram, in Facebook, in Line, in WeChat, and Kakao Talk, and WhatsApp to share different information with others and connect them together. Creating different content for us to acknowledge each other, give praise and clap, celebrate. Mentorship and expert interaction, learning directly from professionals or individuals who are impacted by the subject matter out there. So again, you might have people who have graduated from your program. You can bring them back for one day every semester, or even just once a year, to offer students feedback on their projects. And benefits of authentic learning environments include these kinds of things. Increased motivation, because we want to have an expertise. We want to look like we're accomplished individuals, relevant learning activities that lead to the student engagement. Better transfer from one situation to another situation. And what they learn in your class maybe can be applied into the next class or in the real world, or the real world back into your class. Developing meta awareness, thinking about your thinking, monitoring, planning, coordinate your tasks, and thinking ahead about where you're attempting to go and what you've accomplished along the way. Practical skill development, learning about project-based learning kinds of things, or how to collaborate with your peers, or how to share and manage resources, and how to communicate and present. Powerful learning experiences. Typical, we want to have an activity where there's inquiry-based learning. They're investigating a problem. They're making a hypothesis and testing it out in a real world-like setting, right? And so we're inspired to learn as if we were a scientist, as if we were a criminal investigator, or as if we were a nurse, right? All these things. And then to collaborate with your peers, because you typically work in a we don't typically work alone in job settings today. We work with a huge team. And so we're sharing what we've accomplished and what we learned and our understandings and learning from others and their understandings. Having opportunities where students can exhibit some leadership, some empowerment, some personal agency, some choice, some control, giving them opportunities to control maybe the parameters of the problem, maybe the solution output, the type of output of a solution, and all that, maybe the choice in terms of the scale of the problem that they're going to address. I had students 5 years ago, before COVID, maybe 6, 7 years ago, and Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico, and the students weren't allowed to use mobile previously, and they had to use mobile after Hurricane Katrina hit. So my students worked as teams designing curriculum based on mobile technologies and to train teachers with that. So it's an example of a powerful project-based or problem-based, actually, learning experience that was real world. And so Puerto Rico didn't just have a problem with Hurricane Maria. They had a problem with corruption in Puerto Rico and how they were handling the money that was being sent in. They also had a problem they had tropical storms after Hurricane Maria, and they had an earthquake. So that was the other thing. They had earthquakes nearby that also caused havoc. So multiple things had hit Puerto Rico all at once. And students tried to design a solution or tried to help them out as a class project, and we did, and my students presented to them. So again, more answers to Maria on your question. Productive struggle, yes, they had productive struggle in that was not an easy project. Time to critique, time to revise, time to reflect. So this is all meta reflection on what you did, what you've done, where you're going, how much you've improved. Again, that last component of critique, and Corinne likes the critique part, I like the reflection part, and then revise. I love the revise part because revise can mean many things at many different levels. It can be small revisions, major revisions, overhauls, and so forth. These are all critical terms when we're talking about production, generation of ideas, because sometimes we get so enthralled with the production of something unique, we forget to evaluate the quality of it, the utility of it, and the replicability of it, and sustainability of it, and the scalability of it. We're just happy we got a solution. Oh, we got to do much more than that. So these are some things. And here's a different model of authentic learning environments, the essentials of authentic learning at more of a K-12 space that involves inquiry, again, inquiry-based learning, personalized learning, role play, portfolios, expert consultation. It's just one visual that I found tonight. The one I want to make you aware of is Professor Jan Harrington. And excuse me, I'll get some cleaning. So I've got some congestion here for just a second. Okay. Excuse me. Okay. All right. So Jan Harrington, she is from Perth, okay, from Murdoch University in Western Australia. It was the world's expert in authentic learning, along with my colleague Tom Reeves. They have a book with a third author, Ron Oliver. The three of them have a book called Authentic Online Learning. And Jan Harrington had a website before she retired called Authentic Learning, and she has 9 steps to authentic learning with videos behind each one. So authentic context, authentic tasks, expert performance, multiple perspectives taking place, maybe doing debates and role play, collaboration, articulation, explaining what you do, clarifying what you know, clarifying what you know, articulate, explain, clarify, communicate. So we're not only learning from reading, we're relearning by explaining, and we're resorting all these concepts in our brains and making sense of them. It's in the explaining part, in the articulation, in the apprenticeship of that articulation, where learning best occurs. Then, again, reflection, scaffolding. To what degree do we need scaffolded advice? Do we need high-level scaffolding or low-level little tweaks? the students know it well enough that just some small little incidental tweaks might help them enough to learn it. So these are the things that Jan talks about in her website on authentic learning. They provide authentic tasks in that website. They provide activities for multiple perspective taking, for coaching, and so forth. So these are the things that she looks at, 9 elements of authentic learning environments in her book, Authentic E-Learning, right? I had that book. I had 2 copies. I had signed copies. Students borrowed it, and I have not gotten it back. I do not think I have that book at home in my library anymore because the students like it a lot. And she talks about the different tasks, resources, and supports that can be provided in an authentic learning environment, the scaffolds, the templates, the guidelines, the models, the frameworks, the supports, teacher supports from online discussion boards or feedback, self-monitoring checks, the checklist kinds of things, as well as the different online and physical resources in these environments, and the activities that students engage in or the tasks. These all intertwine to create a more effective learning experience, if you will. Another visual that I found right before class was this one. Again, by the way, none of these slides I've seen before. I didn't even read a single one before talking tonight, so this is all off the top of my head. Okay, so I think it's going pretty well for all. So I'm all just going. I'm ad-libbing here tonight. All right, so bear with me a second here. So I'm creating a blog to reflect on, or a journal, as Rebecca said. She's using journals. We're using journals in here for students who don't want to come every week or don't have time to make it every week. They can reflect on it in a journal. So the aims there is, to have students work with us peers and work with their peers in a network. So you can have critical friends and web buddies and email pals and all these things in their blogs or in their journals to give feedback to one another. So connections, analyzing, developing, and evaluating. So, analyzing learning objectives to identify appropriate real world contexts where your students could experiment. So thinking about, well, how does this content, well, maybe we can go to Indiana UITS, the University of Technology Services, and maybe they can interview someone who's an instructional designer or sit with the person for a couple of hours to see what their job is like, or apply for an internship or this kind of thing. What kinds of ways could you get students into a real world kind of setting, if you will? And then developing these authentic learning frameworks and activities so that they're reusable next semester, maybe creating short video introductions to them and so forth. And as Corinne was pointing out, to create authentic evaluation structures to provide the appropriate feedback for the students in the class. So again, there's Jan Harrington, there's the book on authentic e-learning, but you also see a guide to authentic e-learning. That's one book from 2010. You'll see your book, Authentic Learning Environments in Higher Ed, Instructional Design Frameworks for Authentic Learning. She's published a ton on this, and now she's got a bunch of videos, and maybe I can quickly play one of these, but I didn't optimize my video and my sound. So let me try this again. I'm going to click back in here and optimize my sound and my video sharing. I'm not sure if this is going to work because we're going to click on something. So I apologize because I didn't set this up ahead of time. But if we click here, so multiple perspectives. So this is one. If I click on multiple perspectives, okay, can anyone see that multiple perspectives that I just clicked on? Do I have to stop sharing and try this again?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
You can you hear this? I'll tell you when. Can you hear that?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
In this series of short movies, I am describing 9 elements of authentic learning environments for use in schools, universities, and other training contexts. In this movie, I'm discussing multiple perspectives. Multiple perspectives in your learning environment allow different perspectives to be examined by students from many different points of view. So multiple perspectives are not just a single perspective, such as a textbook. So if you think about the different kinds of search engines that are around, an example I want to give you is the Digital Library for Earth Systems Education, which is a specific digital library with a collection of hundreds of online resources. And I want to just show you how it can be more useful for education than just a simple Google search, because sometimes when you do a Google search, you find so much and you can often waste an awful lot of time. For instance, say you were interested in exploring whether humans could live on Mars. If you type that in, people on Mars, then you find quite useful information that's very relevant without finding lots of other things about Mars, like men are from Mars and women are from Venus and all of that kind of other material that you would find. Like Mars in this library means Mars, the planet. So if you found there, can people go to Mars? That sounds very, very relevant. And in fact, then you can download a little audio of that.
Its radiation between Earth and Mars poses a hazard to astronauts. How dangerous is it out there? NASA scientists are working to find out.
So I'll end that one at that point. I was just trying to point out that she's got a series of videos. Let me go back and share my screen here. And for each one, so this is a free content, but it's getting kind of dated out there. And she has retired. And I tried getting her to be a guest in this class 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and she declined because of being she doesn't. Unfortunately, she's retired. Her husband, Tony Harrington, worked with her at the University of Wollongong before Murdoch, and they wrote an article, What is Authentic Learning Environment? Wollongong is on the East Coast, Murdoch is on the West Coast. And it's a great article. There's a link to it. I'll put my slides up in Dropbox, and you can download my slides, or I might just send them. The other thing I'm briefly going to talk about, I'll spend maybe 3-4 minutes on this, is normally Tom Reeves comes in and talks about his project for the World Health Organization, or WHO. The World Health Organization has created an authentic e-learning scenario to teach about the cold chain. There's Dr. Reeves. There's a second one with his friend Omid from Switzerland, and James Vesper from Rochester, and Hannah Terrace, a friend of mine from Perth, who might be back in Finland now. So they're on this bus, and all these scientists and all these educators are on the bus learning about the cold chain within Turkey, and they're traveling in Turkey, going to drop off vaccines at different locations. They have to keep it at a certain temperature, or the vaccine loses its viability. And so they're learning about all how this process normally takes place. So it's a real world issue that if we don't keep the vaccines stored at a proper climate, they'll be worthless, right? And so they're learning about
Pharmaceutical Cold Chain Management on Wheels is a training course aimed at developing skills to critically evaluate a pharmaceutical cold chain system and improving associated supervisory skills. The course encourages participants to make direct observations at the storage and health facilities that they visit while physically traveling down the length of the cold chain. This competency-based training approach is designed to offer participants insights into the theoretical background of pharmaceutical cold chain management, combined with real-life, hands-on observations at a variety of storage and healthcare facilities.
Did you all hear that, by the way? Corinne, did you hear that?
Yes, everything is going well.
Yeah, it's a nice explanation. So they tried, so they couldn't continue to have the training take place in a physical way, so they created a digital version of this process. And they utilized Tom Reeves and Jen Harrington and Ron Oliver's book, A Guide to Authentic E-Learning, in designing the new course that kind of taught them, and they might have done it in a blended fashion. And they rely on these principles. Authentic context, of course, that's what we saw there. Authentic tasks, of course. Expert performance, they're watching, they're getting role models. Multiple roles and perspectives. So they take on different roles of different stakeholders within this process as they move along within the virtual scenario as well as in the physical space. Collaborative knowledge construction, reflection, as I said, and articulate. To me, it's reflection and articulation that are the most powerful of all these things. For me, the most powerful learning principles are organization, right? Organizing scattered data, problem finding, if you will, but then explaining what you found, articulating what you found and what you didn't find and what you're still wrestling with. The coaching and scaffolding is important from experts along the way, sure, over the materials or peers, and then authentic assessments of what one has learned. So they're taking a realistic role, vaccine store manager, and doing a real life task, deciding if the vaccine has been affected by freezing or not. Okay, so that's the context and the task that they're applying. Taking a realistic role, a healthcare worker, primary healthcare worker, doing a real life task, which vaccines should be used first because they might expire more quickly than otherwise. And by the way, yesterday I got my flu shot, just as a little aside. Did take longer. There's more forms these days. I swore, but I did get it. So assignment, providing consulting services to the Albanian Institute of Public Health. So there we have, we've got the assignment there, and access to experts out there who might, solve or address our problem. And with their different levels of expertise, whether expertise is thermodynamics or providing services or improving access or redundancy controls. So we have multiple roles and perspectives that we're forced to take on at different points along the way, whether we're a local pharmacist or a doctor or a cold store manager or whomever. And so here's our different roles that we're taking on in this particular problem. And they might interact with one another coming from different countries around the world, parts of Africa, Sri Lanka, Micronesia. In today's digital world, we can do that rather handily. We had someone from Canada / Michigan on tonight. Last week, people from Taiwan, and the week before, Australia and India / Pakistan in some ways. So reflecting on in a diary, in a journal, in a blog, and some other ways, in discussion groups and so forth, maybe doing online discussion with Flip, video-based discussions, what used to be called Flipgrid, and then getting some expert advice or scaffolding with live chatting with experts out there when we run into a problem, just contacting whomever. We all get this message oftentimes when we are on a new website. Do you want to chat with someone? We have a live chat person here who's willing to talk to you if you want. And then maybe providing some digital annotations. As we've said, hypothesis is a tool. Perusal is another tool to annotate students' work. Back when I was a grad student, after grad, there's a professor at Carnegie Mellon. Her name is Chris Neuwirth, and she created something called Prep Editor. And a Prep Editor would have the students' paper in the middle, and then on the right-hand side, they have students' comments, and then more students' comments, and more students' comments, and they'd squish the paper up, and you have multiple layers of students' comments next to it. It was kind of a nice, beautiful, functioning tool in the early days of the internet. Something I wish I would have designed. It was a pretty brilliant kind of tool. There are many such tools out there in the early days. Here's some coaching and scaffolding provided by experts. So here we've got the authentic assessment loop, individual or group reports on authentic tasks, the peer reviews and comments on each other's reports, commenting on other people's reports after doing peer review of them, and maybe having some guidance for doing the peer review, having some help what a peer review looks like, and maybe do a scavenger hunt blog posting on different circumstances that might come into place, different problems, different announcements. I had a project early on at IU where we were looking at experts going across the Arctic North into the North Pole, and they were sending notes to kids in schools of problems that they encountered, and the kids in schools had to solve them. They were fictional problems, actually. Arctic alerts that they were getting about the explorers in their experiments and their dog sleds and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. And the students took on roles of famous people like Mahatma Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Sir Edmund Hillary, Francis Bacon, whatever. And so I had to look up these famous people to do role play to solve the problems that they were being sent on these Arctic alerts and other things. And we looked at the levels of perspective taking kids were asking. This was circa 1994, 95, 96, when IU was actually the sponsor of this project. And we had the IU flag at the North Pole, all sorts of cool stuff was going on. And we had a brand new school of education where stuff was happening like that. So diaries about their learning and what they didn't learn, Flipgrid videos, and discussion forums, all these kinds of things. So peer review, blogs, diaries, videos, discussion forums. And you can see that all within the learning management system for students to reflect, to articulate, to collaborate within this role play type of environment. The role of technology is to, of course, is to deliver that particular problem or multiple problems, multiple scenarios, and additional content to help students solve the management problem that they've been given. Assignment submission, maybe it's time submission, maybe once a week they get a different assignment, maybe a couple of days, or it's maybe time elapsed, or maybe it's when they solve a problem, they get a new one. And they also might do intelligent testing, AI marking and assessment, and so forth. They use cognitive tools. So instead of just learning from, he's got an X there. Instead of just content delivery and assignment submission and marking and grading, we're moving to a new age where technology tools can be used for knowledge construction, knowledge building, juxtaposing ideas against one another, building artifacts, sharing those artifacts, archiving them for next year's class, and communicating our results. All these augmentative aids, if you will. So the learning environment involved different learning technologies, but this is getting a little old now. Many of these things no longer exist, but this was just maybe 5, 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago when they were doing this kind of stuff. And the technology is a facilitator of different learning environments. You've got the learner who's getting feedback from mentors, who's constructing knowledge with colleagues, who's engaged in authentic tasks, who's accessing online resources, right? All these things one individual learner is doing. So some of it's solitary and alone, some of it's with peer support, some of it's with mentor support and feedback, all this kind of stuff.
In really, among of the many e-learning courses platform I've been going through, I think IPELA is the best one in terms of too practical, and it is based on the real situations.
The tasks were really challenging and real-life application of the theory learned.
The resource persons were available all the time.
And I thoroughly enjoyed the fact that we had access to experienced mentors who were always available and shared in an unrestrained and very cordial manner their huge wealth of experience in vaccines.
I never felt that I was doing a course online. It was rather like doing a course, a regular course with instructors, with resource persons near you.
The high technology in video and pictures make me feel like being in a place.
The approach of working with people from different countries and sharing experience with each other will help us to learn from each other.
It was great to work with professionals with similar interests from a whole diverse list of countries. We still keep in touch, exchanging professional experience.
The impact, I believe, is that the VVM now is used in all the health centers, and they know the use of this VVM in the vaccination process.
Currently, I'm using the knowledge and skills obtained from the course to improve my capacities and capabilities of making decisions, especially when I'm doing supportive supervision, during the training, and during monitoring and evaluation activities, including evaluation. So among of many e-learning platforms, I should advise IPELA learning course to be very best and very authentic. Go authentic.
So go authentic is the technique, in effect, and I think each one of those letters stands for an activity within it, within this program. So I'll stop my sharing there. I didn't remember. I knew those were there, the audio clips and video clips and all that. I'm happy. I just had forgotten they were in there. Those are really, really effective, I think, in showing the effectiveness of the authentic learning situation. So I hope you enjoyed tonight with Rebecca. I hope you learned something from my mini little lecture on authentic learning. I hope you inspired you to maybe take a look at Jen Harrington's articles and papers. Look her up. I'll try and post some of those. I think we have some of her work in Dropbox. If not, I'll include my slides tonight in Dropbox, and I'll try and find a couple of her articles I can also put in Dropbox if you want to access them. She's got an entire book. From time to time, I sometimes find that book free online, and I can share it. Sometimes it's not free online, but I've noticed a couple of times that I've been able to access it free, and it's very informative. I will say a last comment. In 2006, she was a keynote at a conference in Hawaii, and before her keynote, earthquake hit, 2 earthquakes hit, and knocked out all the power in the building at the Sheraton Waikiki, and so her keynote was saved to the next day when they had some light, not much light. But yeah, I remember that last time I saw her speak was after a major 6.9 earthquake followed with a 6.6 earthquake back in November 2006, I think, somewhere. Comments or questions from anybody tonight?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's always great to see a great guest speaker, and then I just put in the chat, but it gave me motivation to go back to my authentic assessment paper that I have not finished.
Yes, and some of you had authentic assessment with parent duty here tonight. So thank you all for coming tonight. And next week, I think it's on Monday. I'm going to confirm that with Jessie Yee. She'll be at noon in the UK, which might be 5 p.m. on the East Coast. So I'm going to have to confirm that. She lives near Stonehenge. The last time I saw her, I visited her in Stonehenge. That's been a decade since I physically saw her, a little more than a decade, 11 years. And but if you want to visit, she's in an exciting place in England to visit. So she likes visitors. You'll like her presentation tomorrow or next week, or discussion with her. She does great work and is very interesting person. So again, thanks for tonight. I'm going to stop the recording here any minute. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, week 6, part 2, R622, learning environment design. Thank you all for coming tonight. Bye-bye.